So I know you guys are dying to get into artificial nails. We've been doing a lot of basic stuff up until this point. But before we move on to full-on gel sculptured enhancements, I wanted to go over e-filing because this is a very, very integral part of doing nails, especially if you're doing nails in high volume. It just is something that will save you a lot of time and a lot of wear and tear on your body. So today we're going to talk about e-file anatomy, general use and care of your e-file, how to shop for an e-file and what to look for, when you should use an e-file, because I do get asked that a lot, how to know when to use an e-file, and also, are e-files dangerous? This is also a big topic of discussion across the industry as well as for the public, because I know lots of people have had bad experiences with e-files. Terminology you need to know are RPMs, which is rotations per minute, torque, control unit, handpiece, and lock chuck. And today we're just going to talk about the actual e-file itself. Okay, so let's get started first by talking about a little bit of anatomy of an e-file. So this is the handpiece of an e-file. The handpiece is the part that does all of the work. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about the importance of the handpiece because it really is the most expensive part of your e-file, and it is the part that is doing everything that you experience. So inside of here is actually a lock chuck, and that's what this part is here. So it allows us to tighten the mouth around the bit. So inside it looks like, usually it's about three little bars that when you tighten it, it goes like this, and then it opens, and then it tightens and opens and tightens. So that's what the lock chuck is. The lock chuck is what allows us to put a bit inside the machine. And on any e-file, usually it will have some type of indicator that your e-file is open or closed. So this particular handpiece has two little dots that allow me to understand that my e-file is locked. And then when it's open, the two dots are separated. Can you see that? Okay. So what you want to look for when you're locking and opening your e-file is that it goes all the way until you should feel a click inside of here. And that means that that lock chuck is completely open or completely closed. When it closes, essentially what we're doing, if I have a quick bit here, what it's doing inside that you can't see is it tightens around the bit like so, and it holds the bit in place, and then it spins the bit once the motor gets started. So what you want to do when you put in a bit, and we'll talk about this again next week when we get into actual bits, is close your e-file completely. Make sure that it is locked not only on the indicator, but that you feel that click. And then I usually give my bits a gentle tug just to make sure that that is perfectly in place. The reason why is bits can be different lengths, and the length of the actual shaft inside of here and the distance that the lock chuck needs to grab onto the bit. If I only put my bit in slightly, it may actually pull completely out even though I have it locked, okay? So make sure that you check that the bit is actually secure. You don't have to push the bit all the way into the machine, and we'll get into that next week when we talk about bits and especially when we get into the e-filing. But just make sure that you understand the locking mechanism inside, which is that lock chuck that tightens around the bits, okay? That's what keeps our bit from falling out, and it keeps control of the bit. Also inside of here are a bunch of pieces that make up the motor of the actual handpiece. So again, like I said, this is the part that actually drives this whole spinning action up here and allows our bit to spin. So the whole motor is actually inside of here, much like a car engine where it turns everything, spins everything. And then you've also got a power cord that connects to your control unit. And so the handpiece gets the electricity it needs from the control unit, and it allows the motor to speed up at different rotations per minute, okay? So this is the most expensive part of your e-file. This is the part that you really should be taking care of. And while we are e-filing, I'm gonna show you guys just real quick. Let me create some dust here with a bit. I'll just quickly file on something for you. When we put in bits into our machine, and I'll zoom in here for a second. There we go, okay? So when we put a bit into our handpiece, it goes right inside. Most bits are standard width, which are 3/32 of an inch wide. You can see this is my bit that I've already used earlier today. Okay, I'm going to put it in to the desired depth that I want depending on the length of nail that I'm working on. You can put the bit all the way inside the machine, but I usually leave it just tad out so that I can work on longer nail lengths. And then I'm going to turn my lock chuck until I can feel that click and give my bit a gentle tug, okay? So let me just show you what this looks like when I'm filing, and I'll show you what I mean about dust. All right, so I've got my e-file on very low, maybe about 7,000 RPMs, and I can just quickly create some dust here, okay? All right, so what you'll notice after you're done e-filing is that the actual opening of the e-file gets dust on it, and hopefully I got a little bit on here. Okay, so this opening right here, as we're filing, the dust will start to hit down onto this opening, and typically after you're done e-filing for a while, you'll have a bunch of dust right around this opening here. You'll see this a lot as I start to use the e-file on my videos, but I wanted to show you guys this opening is very important. So before you take the bit out, we want to keep dust out of the opening. So if you remember, the whole motor is inside of here, and we want to make sure that dust isn't getting in there and causing any problems. So what I typically do is I dust off the opening before I take the bit out. So you can use a dust brush and just dust off the opening. Some people blow on the opening. I don't like to blow on stuff because it's a bad habit. We don't want to get the bacteria from our mouth on anything. So sometimes when we are blowing on stuff, we're actually getting our mouth bacteria on our tools or on nails. It's just a bad habit. So I usually use some kind of dust brush, just dust off the opening. Then you can open the lock chuck and you can pull out your bit, okay? That will actually help to prevent dust from getting down inside your e-file opening. The more dust that gets packed in here, the more that it's going to cause friction inside the motor, and it's going to be, you know, requiring maintenance much more often than really needs to be. Okay, so that is how you put in a bit and you take out a bit, taking into consideration the dust that is on the opening before we put anything back inside. Because you can imagine if I take out a bit, there's a whole bunch of dust around the opening. As I slide a new bit in, I'm going to be packing that dust just like this inside of my handpiece, and I don't want any dust inside of here. All right. We also want to talk about the anatomy of the control unit, which is very important. So let me show you the part that actually controls my handpiece. Okay, and I'll zoom out a little bit so you guys can see better. Okay, so this is the actual control for my handpiece. A lot of people think that the handpiece is the part that does all of this, but the handpiece actually is just a spinning motor, and this control unit is what allows me to control the speed. So I'll turn it off here. This one, I really like this e-file. It is probably one of the Cadillacs of e-files, but it does such a good job because it allows me to slide the speed up and down in very finite levels. So if you've ever seen e-files that have push buttons, some of them have dials like this too, and I'll talk about battery packs in a second. Some of them have kind of like a twist dial like this. Some of them have these levers that slide up and down. The thing I really like about these types of levers, let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit. The thing I like about these types of levers is I can very gradually change the speed. If it's some type of push button, I can only select the numbers that are on there, or if it's clicks on a dial, I can only select certain speeds. I really like levers like this because it allows me to go really gradually up in speed, and I can adjust those things. My e-file, you'll notice, also has a forward and a reverse, and this one also has a neutral position, so I can actually click down, I can click up into neutral, and I can click into forward. I really like e-files that have a neutral position because when we change directions, and again, we'll get into this as we start e-filing, I just want to talk to you guys about anatomy of an e-file. But when we're in forward, our e-file is filing in a spinning motion in one direction, and when we do it in reverse, it goes the opposite direction. So when we're in forward, our bit is actually spinning in a clockwise motion, okay? And that's why when we drag it from right to left, we get that grinding action or that shaving action. So forward is in a clockwise motion and reverse is in a counterclockwise motion, okay? So if you want to see which direction is which, you can also easily feel it. So let me just plug my handpiece back into my control unit. I'm in forward right now, and I will turn on my machine. And let me put in a bit before I do that. Okay, So I have my handpiece here. I'm going to turn my machine on. My machine is in forward, and I can turn it all the way up just so you guys can see. That's all the way up. And then here's about medium. So I'll just do medium for right now. Okay, so I'm in forward. When I'm in forward, my bit is spinning this way. It's spinning in a, if I was looking down the barrel of it like this, it's spinning in a clockwise motion, okay? So when I go from right to left, I actually end up filing the nail. If I have it in the wrong direction, I'll notice that right away, because when I go from right to left, nothing happens. It's just rolling across my nail. So I go into neutral to stop my motor completely, and then I can go back into forward. Okay, so forward is in clockwise. So I'm going from right to left on the nail, like so, right to left, and that's going to shave off product while I'm in forward. If I'm in reverse, and this is important for when you're doing your opposite hand or if you're a lefty, lefties are going to go in reverse. So now I'm in reverse on my machine. I'm going to go left to right. You'll notice this bit doesn't do anything because it's not a left-handed bit. It's not meant for going in the reverse direction, but I can also feel that this bit is pulling across from left to right, okay? So, like a car, we don't want to shove our e-file from forward to reverse. If you can imagine driving along in your car and then all of a sudden shifting from, drive to reverse on your car, you'd completely kill your car. So that's why I like e-files that have a neutral position. It allows me to turn off the spinning action in my handpiece without having to completely turn off my e-file. If your e-file does not have a neutral position, like this one does not, it only has forward and reverse, then you have to completely turn off the power to your control piece, and then you can switch directions. That's gonna save your motor in your handpiece from a lot of wear and tear. You wanna make sure anytime you change spinning direction, you turn off your handpiece completely and then switch it into the opposite direction, okay? So that's some important stuff there, general use and care for you. Also, talking about dust, we talked about this is the control unit for the power. Okay, so this is what actually controls the amount of electricity that goes to my handpiece here. And there are also battery packs. A lot of people opt for battery packs because they are just so cute and portable, and you can see how they're cordless. The only thing I'm going to tell you about battery packs that you need to keep in mind is that it's a battery, and just like anything, the battery gets worn out. It doesn't actually give you consistent power like an actual wired control unit does. And I know this thing looks like an absolute brick, but if you're working every day at your table, I highly recommend you get an actual big control unit instead of a battery pack. I actually always use this one here, the big control unit with my handpiece plugged in. And then the cool thing about this is my handpiece is actually compatible with my battery pack. So if I'm gonna do pedicures or if I'm traveling, I definitely bring my battery pack with me. It's much easier to travel with than this crazy 6-pound control unit. But this battery pack is really not meant for day in and day out use. And as I said, just like anything with a battery, the battery starts to get worn out. I don't get as consistent power to my handpiece, and it's just not ideal. Also for switching directions, stuff like that, I like to make sure that I can better control my work. So this one you'll see also is the same idea. This one turns on, it has a dial. It has some indicator lights on the top. So you'll see my battery's low and you can hear my handpiece going kind of crazy. But it has my battery indicator here and then the on light. And then I have all of these different speeds that I can choose on my battery pack. But I don't want to go from forward to reverse until I turn this off because I want to make sure my handpiece completely stops. Then I can switch directions and then I can turn it back on. Okay? So battery packs are great for portability. They are cute, but I highly recommend if you're looking for an e-file that's going to last you forever and something that you can use day in and day out, I highly recommend you get a wired big box control unit like this one because it's going to last you much longer. It's going to give you much more control and it's going to be a lot easier to use on a daily basis. Okay, so these are the two different types of control units that we can use for our e-files, and then the most important part of it is our handpiece. The handpiece is also something that it varies a lot between different machines. I have owned several handpieces in my time. And really what you want to look for is something that feels comfortable for you to hold. So we hold our e-file just like a pencil. Usually I hold my e-file right about here. Depending on how long my nails are, I might have to back up my hand if my nails are super long at any given time. But usually I hold it just like I do a pencil. And I want to make sure that it feels comfortable for my hand, for my sizes of hand. And I like to also check the weight of the e-file, make sure that it feels comfortable as I'm moving around. Because as we're e-filing, you can see that I have to kind of shimmy back and forth, I have to tip up, I have to tip down. So even these little finite motions in my hand and in my wrist, I want to make sure that the e-file is comfortable for me to use. All right? So that's just some things to think about when it comes to the e-file. I really recommend you guys try and get your hands on an e-file. It's a great thing to test, especially if you're going to like a trade show, if you're a professional nail tech. If you're not a professional or you don't go to trade shows, then I recommend that you search for smaller hand pieces. I know there's a lot of machines that have big fat hand pieces that are usually cheaper, but I find, especially for my size of hand, that the big hand pieces, they're about this wide and they just feel so uncomfortable. They don't make you feel like you have enough control. So I like smaller hand pieces. We have several, that we have at the Nail Hub that I have used myself that I really like. But just get the best quality you can for your budget, because it does make a huge difference. And an e-file like this one, for example, usually runs about $400 and something. Maybe I think it's $420 when we sell them at retail. And it is a lot of money, I'm not gonna lie, but this e-file literally should last you your whole entire career. So if you're spending $421 for your whole entire nail career, to me, that's not a lot of money. And I know a lot of you probably spend more on a pair of shoes. So e-file, definitely get the best you can for your budget. And I would not recommend buying an e-file that's cheaper than $75. It's just unrealistic to get something that's high quality that's cheaper than $75. Just end of story. So if you're looking at really, really cheap options on eBay, just keep in mind that it's going to have a hard time. Okay. So what else do we look for? So we talked about the handpiece. The size. We talked about the ability to go up and down gradually with our levers here, swiping up and down with a neutral position, on and off switches. We talked a little bit about battery packs and why they're cute, but they're not necessarily functional for every single day use. What else should we look for? Well, a lot of times with manufacturers, we look for rotations per minute, which essentially just means how fast the bit spins per minute. So typical e-files will be somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 RPM. Some of them even go beyond that. That basically means that if you were on full all the way here on your e-file, if I'm all the way up on max, that means the max rotations per minute that my e-file can go is 25,000 rotations per minute, okay? Now, I want to talk a little bit about RPMs, because RPMs is something very important to understand. So RPMs is essentially the ability for the machine to spin. However, it doesn't actually tell you how the machine is able to spin as it touches product. So let's talk really quick in a physical sense, and I can show you an example of this, and you'll even hear the difference. Okay, so I am in forward on my machine. My machine is all the way up. And I'm going to take my machine, so it's spinning at 25,000 RPMs right now, and I'm just going to apply some pressure on the product. So as you might notice, my machine doesn't change sound. It doesn't go ring. It actually stays about the same, and the speed keeps up when I apply pressure to the nail. This whole idea of being able to continue to spin when pressure is applied to the bit is what we call torque. It's the driving force of this bit. So the RPMs are nothing more than how many times it spins. The torque is its ability to keep spinning as I apply it to product. So right now I'm applying it on gel, but I could also apply it on acrylic. I could apply it on wood. I could apply it on anything. And so we want to make sure that our e-file is able to keep up with this spinning motion even when we apply it on product. So if you have an e-file where it's spinning full speed and then you apply it on the nail and you can hear it go in pitch from as you lift up. So as I go up, it's like me, and then I touch it like that, okay? That change in pitch is telling you that this spinning action doesn't have a lot of torque and it's not able to actually keep up with filing the product that you're trying to file. So not only do we want to think about RPMs, which is how fast the machine can spin, we also want to think about torque, which is the ability for the machine to keep up with us as we're filing on different types of product. Torque is just as important, if not more important, than RPMs when shopping for an e-file. And oddly enough, torque is one of the few things that people actually talk about when it comes to e-files. For whatever reason, manufacturers just advertise rotations per minute, and a lot of nail techs and nail enthusiasts have this thought that the more RPMs, the more powerful the machine, but that's not actually the case. You also need to talk about torque. So all of the e-files, for example, that we offer at the Nail Hub, I know for a fact have amazing torque and speed. I have tested them all myself, otherwise I wouldn't offer them. However, you can also ask the manufacturer of the e-file that you're interested in about the torque. And if you're not happy with it, I also usually recommend that you ask the manufacturer about their return program, because if you notice that the machine is not able to keep up with filing on acrylic, gel, and all of that, and it changes that pitch and it's kind of dragging as you're working, then it doesn't have torque, and that's not going to be a good e-file for you. The biggest danger with a low torque, high RPM e-file is as we are applying pressure on the nail, we actually, when we're using a high quality e-file, we just barely touch the bit to the nail and it allows us to do all the work. This machine does all the work for us, and that's the whole idea behind using an e-file. If I have a machine that slows down when I touch the nail surface, I'm going to end up putting more pressure on the nail, which inadvertently hurts my hand and my wrist, and it also can cause mistakes where you wrap the bit around the finger, you catch on stuff, you create pressure on the nail plate, you damage the person's nail plate or even their matrix, you cause too much vibration, heat, etc. So we don't want to have a machine that we put a lot of pressure. We just want to barely glide over the surface with the bit and allow the bit and the machine to do the work for us, okay? So we talked about how to shop for e-files, we talked about general use and care, e-file anatomy. So let's talk a little bit about when to use an e-file and are e-files dangerous? Okay, so without getting too deep into bits, because I want to talk about bits in our next lesson, e-files, if you think about it, are very similar to a hand file. So the idea is, and let me just open up a hand file really quick. All right, so here's our hand file, right? So we have this straight surface, and we're only able to use this, basically this area of the file to file, because when we're holding it, we hold about this much of it, and then we use about maybe, this length of the file while we're working. Okay, so imagine instead of it being flat like this, we make it round. And I have a whole bunch of examples of bits that are going to look very similar to this file. Okay, so here's a perfect example. So you guys are probably going to see immediately that these things look very similar. Okay, this is a diamond bit, which we're going to go over next week. But you can see that it has the same type of gritty texture as a hand file. So essentially what we're doing is we're taking a straight surface and we're making it into a round surface. So instead of having to go up and down like this on the nail to get that filing, and instead of having to do, for example, using different angles like this on this straight surface, I can now use a bit to do that. So the bit is going to be spinning, which means it's going to do all the filing for me, and all I'm trying to do is attack the given area that I'm working on. So I can do that from the side as well, just like we do with a file. So if I pretend that my bit is nothing more than a spinning nail file, I'm able to understand that this is going to file as I move the bit around on the nail surface, okay? Bits are cylindrical, they come in different sizes, but the idea is the same thing as a hand file, they just come in different types. We're gonna get into the different types next week. So that is basically what e-file is for. We don't have to use so much hand motion like this, so if I zoom out for you guys. So when we typically hand file, usually our wrist and our hand is doing this kind of motion. We're filing. So you can see that over time, my wrist and my hand is going to take a beating. A lot of nail technicians develop carpal tunnel or other joint muscular issues. So this kind of constant, and especially if I'm doing a lot of filing like this, even my elbow gets into the picture. So by being able to just hold my hand still and go like this and attack the different areas as I'm filing, I can even move the client's finger around. You can see that I'm able to achieve a lot more with very little movement in my wrist and my hand. This is actually also able to spin faster than I'm able to pass a file. So I'm able to achieve a lot more in a shorter amount of time, okay? So that's the idea behind e-filing. E-filing can literally be used for any portion of the service. It can be used for everything from nail prep to finish filing the free edge to finish filing the surface of the nail. It can be used for basically anything that a hand file can be used for. And that's why we have so many different types of bits, because if we want to get into a sidewall area, so let's say we're getting into a very, very, very small area on the side of the nail, or maybe we're filing the surface of the nail, or maybe we're prepping the natural nail plate, the bits are going to do different things for us, and that's why we have different types of bits. With a hand file, we can do all of it with just one grit, but also with a hand file, we have to change our angle of approach to get into all the different areas, but that's why we use different bits, is to achieve different things on the nail. So here's my diamond bit that's very, very similar to an actual hand file, okay? So that's what e-filing is for. It saves you time and energy. It saves you wear and tear on your body, and it allows you to be much more precise and to get into little teeny tiny nooks and crannies on the nail, whereas a hand file sometimes struggles doing that. But both have a place in the salon and in an appointment. And are e-files dangerous? This is also a big question that I get asked. Well, as you can see, if this is not turned on, it can't do much. And even if I put a carbide bit inside that has flutes on it or teeth that looks kind of scary, okay, so this looks sharp. Oh my gosh, it's gonna cut me. Well, it's not going to do anything unless me as the nail tech is yielding it. So the real person who causes the damage isn't the bit or the file or the e-file. The person who can actually cause the damage is me, the person who is using it inappropriately. So I'm going to get into in the next several videos how we actually e-file step by step. I'm going to go through everything from super basic to super advanced, and we're going to talk about all the different types of bits that exist, which ones you use for which, and we're going to start to use e-files as we move through our services. And the reason why I wanted to talk about e-files today is because as we get into artificial services, you're going to need this in order to be able to keep up with some of the stuff that we do. You can absolutely hand file if you feel more comfortable doing that. There is nothing wrong with that, but just realize that with hand filing, it does sometimes cause more wear and tear on your body, and sometimes it's harder to get into specific areas with a hand file, and you'll see that as we move along, okay? So we talked about everything today, and I wanted to also go over our do's and don'ts to wrap up our video. So absolutely treat your handpiece like a baby. Keep dust out of the opening. Get your handpiece maintained every 12 to 18 months. And when I talk about maintenance, if you remember what I was talking about dust getting into our handpiece, the dust can actually cause problems over time, even if we're very careful. So just like you're getting an oil change for your car, you should be getting a quote unquote oil change for your handpiece. You can do this by sending it into any certified e-file repair place, or even sending it back to the manufacturer. Most manufacturers have a repair program for their e-files, and I recommend that you do this on a regular basis, typically once every year if you're working in the salon full time, or if you only dabble with an e-file, typically every 18 to 24 months is fine as well, as long as you are keeping dust out of the handpiece. Definitely invest in the highest quality that you can afford. I understand that not everyone can afford a $400 e-file. However, I will tell you that you absolutely get what you pay for. Anything that's less than $100, you're not going to be getting a very good e-file. So if you're interested in e-file techniques and getting into e-filing, I recommend that you try and stick within the $250 to $400 range. Again, you get what you pay for, but I think honestly, out of all the e-files I've seen, anything that's less than that, you're just going to be wasting your money. It's going to die on you quickly. It's not going to be able to keep up. It's not going to have torque, and it's just not going to be able to do what you need. As someone who bought a $50 e-file when I first started, I was not able to do half of the stuff I'm able to do now. So definitely keep that in mind. And then consider torque. So as we talked about, rotations per minute is just the ability for the machine to speed up and to spin. Torque is the machine's ability for it to continue spinning as we apply pressure to the bit. And that's very important. Torque is very important to maintain that ability for the e-file to work, even though we're working on different surfaces. And that also keeps us from applying too much pressure or potentially causing damage to the nail or to our clients. Don'ts for the day: don't drop your handpiece. We definitely want to make sure we're not dropping the motor that drives our e-file. Don't pack dust into the opening. Don't go years without maintenance. A lot of people that I hear their e-files, it sounds like a rattly old car, and that's just because there's broken off bits inside, there's dust inside. So definitely make sure that you're getting regular maintenance. It's just part of the responsibility of owning an e-file, and it will make sure that your e-file lasts you a very long time if you get it maintained. Don't use force when filing. Don't buy a battery pack unit just because it's cute and small. I know that they are cute, but like I said, unless you are a completely mobile nail tech, I highly recommend you get an actual tabletop control unit like the one I showed you, the big one. And then if you want a battery pack unit or a different e-file that is portable, you can absolutely get a portable one for when you need portability. And also don't rely just on RPMs. As I said, the spinning motion is nothing more than spinning. Torque is very, very important to the success of our e-file use. All right, so we will be getting into the rest of e-filing as we move along. Today is just a quick overview of e-filing. And then next week, we're gonna be talking about different types of bits, what we use the bits for, and we are absolutely going to be going through exactly how to use an e-file in real time. And I will explain how we use e-files and bits to do a better job with our work, how to do everything from prep to finish filing to removal. And we'll get into that as we come across our next upcoming videos. All right, thanks guys. Talk to you later. Bye.